Inside the French presidential palace, tension was palpable as the president sat upright, reading the speech written on the blackboard. 600 million Chinese troops have surrounded and occupied more than half of the European countries. The French military will fight to defend our homeland. After delivering his impassioned speech, the president, along with senior officials, hastily boarded a plane bound for the United States. Meanwhile, in the French command center, high-ranking officials were rummaging through drawers in search of the keys to the nuclear weapons. On the highways leaving France, civilians were already engaged in brutal conflicts, fighting fiercely amongst themselves. Expressionless, Chinese troops dressed in green uniforms and carrying small red flags arrived, effortlessly occupying the streets and alleys of Paris. They encountered no resistance along the way. France was the easiest country they had occupied. According to intelligence reports, the keys to the nuclear weapons were found in the desk drawers. Police officers, priests, and media representatives hurriedly sought out Chinese General Yang. The police system, religious institutions, and media all obeyed the commands of the Chinese military, aiming to eradicate the decadent capitalist atmosphere in France. Well, the Chinese military did not yet have a headquarters, so the French asked if they preferred the Palace of Versailles or Place de la Concorde. A group of French representatives, accompanied by General Yang, toured Paris, but Comrade Yang seemed only interested in a large department store. He chose it as the headquarters, and after all the goods were removed, it became the offices of several commanders. The media was completely under Chinese control, propagating the greatness of communism. Green-clad soldiers with notebooks roamed the streets, demonstrating the power of the masses. Now, for the Chinese military, it was time to govern France properly. They decided to select suitable French individuals to form a new government. A new governor was quickly appointed by Beijing. The governor discreetly suggested that, based on his experience, his official residence should not be too conspicuous. He set up his office in a remote civilian house. Beijing decided to implement planned economies across Europe. Italy would produce noodles, the Netherlands bicycles, Germany electrical appliances. But what about France? Intelligence suggested France produced, for mist, explained in the dictionary as chimneys. So France would produce chimneys. Merchants donned Zhongshan suits and began organizing workers to manufacture chimneys, receiving abundant financial support from the military. Chimneys were sold to anyone, and to Yang, the French seemed too energetic. Unlike the Chinese, who were satisfied with just rice, they spent too much time queuing for shopping, dating, and being stuck in traffic. Thus, new laws were enacted, excessive sex was illegal, and to alleviate traffic congestion, all private cars were confiscated and sent to support local development in third-world countries. Merchants who previously ran adult stores quickly came up with new ideas. With no private cars, human-powered vehicles would surely be welcomed. Thus, a new rickshaw company emerged. Although the lack of private cars posed a challenge for transporting goods, the sight of rickshaws bustling through the city became a unique spectacle. To monitor the words and actions of the French and reduce accommodation pressure, the Chinese military implemented a new policy. French families with spare rooms were obligated to provide accommodation to the military. Yang and several comrades moved into a French household. The daughter of this household was exceptionally beautiful, and her seductive attire often left Yang unable to control himself. To meet propaganda needs, a new televised struggle session took over primetime slots. However, as the whole country engaged in political struggles, two forces emerged, those inspired by the communist cause and those secretly preparing to resist as patriots. Of course, resistance was merely verbal. Yang felt this wasn't enough, they needed to unify French culture and propaganda objectives. So, a revised version of Carmen was staged, which was a great success. Yang was pleased, but the intense love scenes reminded him of himself. He had fallen in love with the landlord's daughter. However, a proletarian revolutionary soldier shouldn't behave like this. He prayed to God, conversed with elders, but one night, after getting heavily drunk, he pushed open the door to the landlord's daughter's room and pounced on her. As more and more unbearable resistance arose, these individuals proved to be cunning adversaries. The Chinese military suffered greatly, wondering what these resistors truly wanted. After analysis, Beijing concluded that they simply wanted to return to their former decadent lifestyle. China only sought control over France. If the French wanted to indulge, so be it. Thus, the central government allowed the reopening of brothels and markets, doubling previous subsidies and extending the annual vacation to 200 days. France once again flourished. The businessman who started the rickshaw company expanded his business empire, opening brothels all over France, and he had become a millionaire. The young people inspired by communism couldn't tolerate this. They didn't want decadence to spread across France again. Their role model, the Chinese military, would never allow it. To appease the confusion and anger of the youth, the central government came up with a brilliant idea: let the military lead the way in decadent living. The Chinese military began appearing in scenes of debauchery, and Yang also indulged in a luxurious lifestyle. However, he soon realized a problem: the military had lost its strength and sense of purpose. They had become corrupted and unrecognizable even to themselves. Disheartened, he reported this to the central government. The resistors finally resolved to armed rebellion. After selecting 7 or 8 individuals, they prepared to storm the Chinese military's headquarters with the few cars they managed to retain. But when they arrived, the headquarters was deserted, as were all the military bases across the city. It turns out after receiving Yang's report, the central government decided to withdraw the troops from France. The patriots seemed suddenly energized, outing those who had close ties with the Chinese military, staging demonstrations throughout the streets. The former president, who was oblivious to the situation from start to finish, was welcomed back to France and received the nation's salute. The patriots who drove out the Chinese military were also honored, and some random medals were distributed. The businessmen contributed some goods left behind by the Chinese military to the president, thus avoiding imprisonment for collaborating with the enemy. The Chinese military retreated back to Beijing, and soon after, the businessman appeared in Rome, still under Chinese control. Doing business here was still better under the Chinese military's rule.